Hello, everybody. Welcome to another IAPC&M CPD and business building webinar. This one's with a slight difference, and the timing is perfect because obviously with what everybody has been experiencing with COVID-19 and lockdown all over the world, we wanted to bring you more specific support like we did a couple of weeks ago with the safeguarding webinar. And this time I'm with Simon Spoor. Hello, Simon. Good evening.
Hi. Hi there.
Now, Simon has had quite a few bizarre close encounters with death over the years, including nearly drowning in a rainforest river, which meant to be safely guiding a group along. While blissed out on an Indian devotional music, he almost drove off a mountainside. On his first and last visit to a McDonald's restaurant, he was held at knife point and found himself admiring the style of his assailant. Goodness. He didn't go back because the food scared him. And one Christmas Eve on a remote, deserted Scottish beach, he accidentally managed to jump into quicksand. However, each encounter has increased his engagement with life. And though while up to his chest in freezing wet sand, his immediate response was to run through his internal filing cabinet to find out how he could deal with this surprising new survival scenario he was encountering. And interestingly, or insanely, his mind instantly came up with an answer. He found himself scanning the beach for a chimpanzee called Cheetah and an elephant called Tanta. His only point of reference was having watched Tarzan at 6 years old. Now, unfortunately, no monkey or elephant came to the rescue, but he lived to tell the tale. So in this entertaining webinar tonight, we're going to learn about the joy of grief and that solitary journey that we cannot do alone, which is a great quote, and how the sacred work of sharing grief opens us up to our deepest love and highest joy. So as coaches and therapists dealing with clients who are dealing with COVID and all those implications of lockdown, and in particular our Lebanese coaching community after what happened last week, these tools are going to help us hold our clients with a greater presence and authenticity in time of personal and global grief. So without further ado, over to you, Simon, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Dawn. And yeah, those encounters, that smattering of encounters I've had with death, caused me to engage more fully with life, each one of them. And so I'm here to share with you some of that that ability to fuse with our grief, to really go deeply into it, to carve out a bowl that will contain our joy. And so I want to thank each one of you for taking the time to come here, and if you're watching in the future, thank you for coming in. If you're watching in the past, then good on you for creating that time machine. And I'm really honored that you've decided to share this space with me. I know it's not an easy topic to engage with, and so many of you are coming on this call. It's really wonderful. So thank you and welcome. So we're here to talk about grief, and grief is a felt process. And so although this is a webinar with information to absorb, to take in, and to think about, my invitation for you is to really feel what's happening in your body, and during that time, you know, maybe you know, really hold that awareness of your felt sense, and afterwards take time to reflect, to journal, to, you know, take time for yourself to, as you may need to. What I have to share is my own and others' experiences, and I understand it might not correlate with yours. And so please put any judgments aside that might arise, and just listen to what I have to share. And then if it doesn't resonate, then you can just simply put that down. And if it does, then hold on to it and weave it into your own truth. So I'd like to begin with a little internal exploration. This is going to be a presentation webinar, but I want to also have some engagement with yourself, because, as I said, it's a felt process. And so I'd like to begin to explore the qualities that we're going to be looking at in this discussion. So I invite you to close your eyes if that's comfortable for you just now, and just take a breath in and a gentle breath out. And breathing in once more and feeling connection to your body, your felt sense, feeling where you are just now. And feel your body sitting on a chair, your feet connecting to the ground, feeling present in the earth. And feel the sky above you, that beautiful blue canopy above, and space spiraling out in all directions. Feeling your place in this universe, on this earth. And I invite you to feel your heart center, your true home there in the center of your being, and how that's connected to your soul, your sense of aliveness. And I invite you to connect to the ancestors, those that have walked this path before us, those that have felt what it is to be human in times gone by. And also to the ancestors that have yet to come, those that lie unborn, yet to arrive here, connecting to them too. For they both have gifts, and we have gifts to share them both. And keeping your eyes closed, or open them if you wish, but I invite you to keep your eyes closed. We're going to explore these two words, joy and grief. Why the joy of grief? Yeah, you may well have asked, isn't that contradictory? And I invite you to explore the emotional qualities of these two words with me just now. Feeling how you are just now, what emotional state you're in, whatever that is, just being with that, with the sensations that are within you. I now ask you to visualize the word joy. And notice the qualities in your body that may change in response to just visualizing the word. And now visualize a time in your life, in the past, in the present, or in the future. A time of joy, of joyfulness, of rejoicing, of enjoyment. What sensations do you feel in your body in response to joy? And your body might want to move a little to deepen the awareness of your felt experience of joy. So holding on to those awarenesses, now settling back into a sense of equilibrium. Let's shift our attention and ponder the word grief. What do you feel in response to the word grief? And visualizing a time of grief in the past, or the present, or the future. What sensations become true for you? Feeling grief, grieving, sadness, sorrow. What qualities arise within you in response to feeling grief? Again, allow your body to move if it needs to deepen the experience. And then when you're ready, gently opening your eyes, coming back into the space. And each one of you has had a slightly different experience there. But I imagine there was some similarities. If we had more time, I'd invite you to share and what that is. But we've only got an hour and a half, and there's much to go through, much material I want to cover. So one of those qualities, one of those words, I'm sure for you, brought up a sensation of lightness, of openness, of billowing, of rising up, of I don't know, looking into the sky, of feeling the sunshine and enjoying the wind in your hair, the rain on your skin, and an engagement with that exhilaration of life. You know, we want to dance with joy. We feel light and uplifted and full of life when we're enjoying something, anything. We feel a sense of spaciousness with joy, and we feel childlike often, and a freedom of our spirit. Yet grief evokes a heaviness, a weight. We might feel it on our shoulders, we might feel it in our chest, or maybe our belly, and we have a sensation of going down, of coming to the ground, to the earth, of feeling dead, maybe inside, of a sensation of dying. A seriousness comes over us, a graveness, a gravitas. And thinking of related words like grievous harm, a harm so serious that bring grief over it, or grievance, harm done, that needs to be seriously addressed before we can find healing. So there's these two words, joy and grief. They may be complementary opposites. They appear to be sort of linked in some way and have some balance between them, some connection, some equanimity even. And to illustrate this further, I'd like to share with you words of Khalil Gibran on joy and sorrow from his masterpiece, The Prophet. You can see that there in the light. It's a small volume if you're not familiar with it, but quite wonderful in its depth of wisdom. And as Khalil was a Lebanese poet, I'd like to offer this short reading as a prayer to those who are suffering in Beirut as we speak. Then a woman said, "Speak to us of joy and sorrow." And he answered, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked, and the self-same well from which your laughter rises would oftentimes filled with tears. And how else can it be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Is not the cup that holds the wine the very cup that was burned in the potter's oven? And is not the lute that soothes your spirit the very wood that was hollowed with knives? When you are joyous, look deep into your heart, and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that has given you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. Some say, joy is greater than sorrow, and others say, nay, sorrow is the greater. But I say unto you, they are inseparable. Together they come, and when one sits alone with you at your board, remember that the other is asleep upon your bed. Verily, you are suspended like scales between your sorrow and joy. Only when you are empty are you at standstill and balanced. When the treasure keeper lifts you to weigh his gold and his silver, needs must your joy and your sorrow rise or fall. So Khalil's really expressing this so beautifully that the two states are really one. They're inseparable. And the deeper we go into our sorrow, the deeper the container we have, like I said before, to hold our joy, and the deeper that container, the more joy we can hold. So let's begin this presentation I've put together for you. It might be easier for you if you've got our images on the screen to just shift them over to the left-hand side, if that's because there'll be images coming up that might get blocked otherwise, or just remove our images altogether. So the subtitle, A Solitary Journey We Cannot Do Alone, that's taken from a wonderful book by Francis Weller, The Wild Edge of Sorrow, to which we're going to look at in a moment. And grief is a deeply personal and internal experience, and no one can really share it with us. There's a unique way that we each travel with grief, as I'm sure you're well aware. Yet to fully experience grief, we really need the support of community, whatever that is for us. It might be coming together with those who've shared a similar grief, like maybe the loss of a child or a loss of a partner, and you come together with other people who've had similar experiences, or maybe you've suffered in war and you come together in a group to share. And then there's a need to be with people who are willing to physically hold us and emotionally hold us, and that might be to be held just while we cry. It might be to be held in our silence. It might be body work. It might be all sorts of different modalities that physically engage with us. And then there's the people that we need in our life to remain connected to us when we walk alone with our grief, when we literally go out into nature and seek solace, but having connection to somebody else, and we'll explore this in a little bit more detail later on, is very important, in my opinion, my experience. So, so without this connection to others on the journey of grief, it can become just too hard to bear, and sadly, well, it just is. And with suicide rates, we're seeing them increasing all the time, particularly among men. It's the leading cause of death for men under 50 in the UK. And I've lost a lot of friends to suicide, very sadly. And I'm sure you've all been touched by that. And I think what is often felt and described as depression is actually grief that isn't being held, isn't being honored, or even recognized within the individual suffering. And maybe more importantly, it's not being recognized within the community. And if we were more aware that grief was the issue and not a sort of clinical diagnosis of depression, maybe we would hold that person differently. Oh, by the way, I chose the picture there of the young man on the mountain because that's a place that I tend to go to a lot when I want to express my grief alone. And I couldn't have done it without the support of others knowing where I was and why I was there at the time. In the depths of expressing that anguish that needed to come out of my heart, of shedding my tears, the knowledge that others loved and cared for me in that moment, and supported the journey and welcomed me back, importantly, made it possible to bear the pain and release those tears. Having that emotional and energetic link to others when we're alone or choosing to be alone is a very important part of the journey, I believe. So let's take a leap of faith into that cloud the young man is looking at, and we're going to explore some aspects of grief. So make notes if you wish, and if you want to close your eyes at any time and feel into your body and in touch with your body's response for a deeper experience, then obviously please do so. And if things come up for you that might be difficult, which they may, then remember to breathe and just be present with it. And as I said earlier, take time afterwards if you need to. Okay. So we're going to explore these 6 topics, and we're going to be following around in order here. The first 2 we're going to spend a little time on, and the other 4 a little bit less time. So if you're getting worried about time, Dawn, by the time we get past gift, we're not, we should be okay. The first, the first one we're going to go into is the 5 gates. And then we'll go to the gift that we can find in grief, and then how grief can be our teacher and guide, why witnessing is important, why allowing our own grief can be important, and the value of solitude. So let's dive into the 5 gates. So this is the work I mentioned earlier of Frances Weller's book, The Wild Edge of Sorrow. It's a wonderful book that I highly recommend to all of you. It's poetic in its writing form. I found virtually every line was just a joy to read, and I've savored the book. I read it a number of times now, and I choose to take it into my garden or to take some time out and really treasure it, because it has so much wonderful wisdom, and he puts it across in such beautiful language, and it's very accessible, and there's so much wisdom in it. And so the first half of the book talks about these gates of grief that she's identified, and this just gives us an idea of some of the areas in which grief presents itself, and how we can work with it. So first one is everything we love we will lose. And all the quotations that you're going to see coming up in the next little while are from his book. My grief says that I dared to love, that I allowed another to enter my very core of my being and to find a home in my heart. Grief is akin to praise. It is how the soul recounts the depth to which someone has touched our lives. To love is to accept the rights of grief. It almost seems in this current global situation that we find ourselves, that it's like we're being forced to face this gate. And it's uncomfortable, to say the least. It brings a lot of fear with it, be it fear for losing a loved one to illness. Obviously, COVID is the primary illness, but to lose a loved one to any illness, and we all hold that fear about our loved ones, about our children, about our partners, about our family, about our friends, or losing a job, a stable income, an ability to socialize or travel. These are all things that we're facing right now. Everyone is facing them across the world, and I don't believe we've ever had a time when we've had something like this that is affecting everybody on the planet. So we're all at this gate just now, and everybody's facing something that they're losing. And this realization that everything that we love and everything we know will eventually, anyway, blow into the wind. When we fully realize this to be true, if we walk through this gate and accept it and grieve it, it can help us to value all that we love with a much greater sense of tenderness and reverence. It's like when we're sitting, there's a stunning sunset, and we know we're never going to witness it again, and we're inspired to marvel at it, to stop what we're doing and just to sit and just soak up the moment. And we pass through this gate of grief knowing that we're going to lose everything, even our own bodies we're going to lose at some point. When we pass through that, then we have an opportunity to marvel at the totality of all life, of the value of each experience, and we taste that so much more. We hold it more closer. We appreciate it more deeply, and of course, we all share this. This is a common journey, and knowing that can help us to have a sense of humanity with everyone we meet and everyone across the world. Right now, we're all sharing this, and we're all in this same boat, and some are in much greater crisis than others, but we're all facing this truth. So that's the first gate that Francis talks about. So the second gate is the places that have not known love. Carving up the self to fit into the world of adults, we become convinced that our joy, sadness, needs, sensuality, and so forth are the cause of our unacceptability. That these pieces of who we are not good enough, that they are, in fact, shameful, and we banish them to the farthest shore of our awareness in hopes of never seeing them again. We cannot grieve for something that we feel is outside our circle of worth. So this gate speaks not exclusively, but very much to childhood, and how we were told to hide certain aspects of who we are, or or we chose to. And of course, we're all affected by this one way or another, and it's part of our journey to find ourselves and to bring back those parts, bring them back from the edges, to dredge them from the depths, and perhaps they'll come up and return to us covered in shame and guilt and maybe a host of other negative feelings we'll have to get through before we can really bring them back into our lives. And this is an individual journey, but it's a collective one. It's seen in things like the Me Too campaign, or currently with the Black Lives Matter. We're asking to be seen by those who ignore us, and we're also asking ourselves to see the parts of us that ordinarily we'd deny. And there are many places within us that are seeking compassion. Just there's so many parts of us that we push aside and push down and deny. And part of the coaching and therapeutic task is simply to create a safe space for that to be found, for that discovery to be made, so it can come back into that circle of worth, as Francis puts it, and then when we can hold it there and grieve for it, we can accept it with the compassion that we have, and integration, healing, wholeness can happen. So that's the second gate. And the third one is the sorrows of the world, something that we're facing very much just now. So human biologist Paul Shepard said, the grief and sense of loss that we often interpret as failure in our personality is actually a feeling of emptiness, where a beautiful and strange otherness should have been encountered. It takes everything we have to deny the sorrows of the world. So the sorrows of the world are huge. There's so many, and they're so big. Exploitation, war, ecocide. It's not just environmental destruction; it's ecocide. We're destroying our planet very, very quickly. Child labor, pollution, squandering the resources that we rely on, that we're going to struggle to live without, and we're squandering them. The many abuses to women, as I said before, depression and suicide rates among men. All of these are part of the sorrows of the world, and this can become massively overwhelming. And as I've named all those things, I'm sure you can feel that in your bodies, and I certainly can. And it's so overwhelming that we often and normally will squash down our knowing of it. We'll turn away. We'll numb ourselves to the reality of this dark side of our species. It's us that's doing it. It's part of our shadow, and it can just be simply too much to take. As Francis says, it's a huge effort to deny, and walking through this gate of grief is inherently very challenging. But really, we have to. We've got to walk through this gate if things are going to change. If life is going to flourish in any meaningful way. I know for me, this gate has been very difficult, but it's one that I've entered and I've turned away from, and entered and turned away from, and and it's, many times I've gone back and forth between hiding from it and engaging with it, and it's not easy. I've worked in conservation. I've lived in the rainforest, working in nature reserves, and trying to do my bit for the environment. And I've done a lot of work with individuals, and it's and a lot of charity work, and it's tough calling. And There's, and I'm going to come back to that on some other things we're going to look at. And so there's also this strange otherness that that Paul Shepherd mentions there, and Francis quotes from in his book. It's like we expect as an animal that we are to meet other creatures and plants and rocks different from ourselves. It's just a biological fact that we're programmed to do that. Yet in this, I don't know, it's like we're in a hermetically sealed and plastic concrete environment sometimes. I mean, I live in the countryside and I feel very blessed to be doing so. But the times I've lived in cities, I find it so difficult. And so this encounter with otherness, for many of us, can be a very rare experience rather than a constant one as it would have been in the past. So indeed, we grieve the loss of that, and it's on a really visceral level. We have this bodily sensation that's needing to encounter other bodies that are different from us, and if that's absent, that can be a huge loss for us. So that's the third gate. And the fourth, what we expected and did not receive. We are shaped for closeness, for intimacy with our surroundings. Our profound feelings of lacking something are not a reflection of a personal failure, but a reflection of a society that has failed to offer us what we were designed to expect. When these things are finally granted to us, a wave of recognition rises that we have lived without this love, this acknowledgement, and the support of this village all our lives. This realization calls forth grief. So, I just have to take a glass of water, excuse me. So, this failure of society, it isn't about blame, because those that cared for us were failed in their turn. It's simply to recognize that this is true for us. We're pre-programmed as highly functioning social animals to expect to be born into a whole integral community with others like us who are going to meet us and greet us and take care of our needs for the warmth, the emotional support, the nurture as we develop and grow. And unfortunately, it rarely happens. It's a problem that we face, that we're born to two parents generally and not a community. And we may only be brought up by one of those parents. We may have no parents. We may be brought up by somebody else. And there's grief, obviously, that results from not having that expectation met. And Francis goes into a lot more detail around that. And this gate also speaks to gifts and a sense of purpose that so many of us are often looking for or feeling that we're not in touch with. And it's like we innately bring talents into the world and sensitivities to certain things that are totally unique to us. And if this isn't celebrated and valued by the community we're born into, as so often in our homogenized culture it isn't, then we can grieve the loss of that recognition of who we are. And as a therapist or a coach or simply a friend, we can help others to sharing their gifts. We can help guide them to find their purpose, their reason for being, and importantly, we can assist to celebrate and welcome them into the community. Welcome their gifts in, and that's huge for many of us to be really seen for the uniqueness that we carry, and we've all got such such unique skills to offer, and in so many different ways, whether we're scientists or artists or healers or whatever, builders, whatever we're here to do. We've all got these unique gifts, and a big part of the healing journey is to find that and celebrate that. So that's the fourth gate. Sorry, fifth. Yeah, fifth gate coming up is the ancestral grief. This is the grief we carry in our bodies from sorrows experienced by our ancestors. Much of this grief lingers in a layer of silence unacknowledged. We've lost our connection to the land, language, imagination, rituals, songs, and stories of our ancestors. And because of this, we feel homeless. So I chose the picture there, the standing stones at Callanish on the west coast of Scotland. And we can only guess at what those stones were for, and we all carry the journey of our ancestors. It's inside us, it's in our bodies, it's in our souls, but we don't know the stories. We can guess at them, and we don't know the wisdom that they pass down to us. So often it's been lost, and for most of us, that chain of connection has been broken somewhere along the line. In Britain, we were invaded by the Romans, and lots of our ancestry got lost. If you're American, white American, and or African American, if you've come from another country to America, you've lost that connection. If you've been taken over by another culture in your land, you've often lost that connection. And this gives us a sense of homelessness, of lacking roots, and so much has been lost, and like I said, we can only guess at the way that people lived their lives and experienced the world, and this lack of knowledge is such a great loss in itself. Seeking connection to the past is, in my opinion, of great value, and I certainly do that, and read around the subject, and are fascinated by the past, and seek out ancient sites to visit. But it's really to find the wisdom. I feel that we can do all of that research stuff, and that's valuable. But really, if we can tap into our own wisdom, then we're going to touch what they touched, because we're not so different from them. We're having very similar lives. The outer world might change, but the internal experience of life and what we need remains constant. So although a clear connection might be lost, we can pick it up, and we can create our own myth and story and language, a language of the soul or the heart, and we can pass that on. And then we also carry our ancestors' joy and their suffering, and for all qualities, everything is passed from one to another, through our genetics and through our nurture. It all gets passed on, and we may be very aware of how our parents or our grandparents' pain has directly affected us, and how we hold their grief and as our suffering, and also their joy. But what of the many generations that went before? It's deep, and it's really challenging work to explore some of that. And of course, we're all going to become ancestors in the not so distant future at some point. And so a question that this gate asks is, what am I leaving for future generations? And that may in itself, that question may evoke grief. And can I heal myself so that those future generations in the continuing lineage don't take on that suffering? And as coaches and guides, we certainly have that a task for us, for sure. So so that's France as well as some of France as well as work. So I encourage you to explore that further and dive in there. He also talks about trauma being a potential another gate, but hasn't put that in his book as a separate subject. But obviously that could well be could be a whole new book. But we'll see where he goes with that. So I want to look at some of the gifts that grief brings. So for some of you, you'll be aware that there's great gifts in grief. Some of you will be maybe confused by that or intrigued. So I'm just going to touch briefly on the ball of grief. So you may have come across this before. It's a common image for understanding grief. It comes with grief comes along with any emotion really can come up with grief. As you can see here, anguish, disappointment, pain, rage, dread, anxiety, depression, denial, helplessness, vindictiveness. Everything's in grief, and it can all be happening all at the same time, and it can happen over a long period of time, and it can happen very fast. And grief is a totally personal journey, and it happens in all different ways. And I would also add into this ball, I would put in release and liberation and freedom and even humor and laughter and celebration. They can all be woven into that ball. Anything is possible when grief blows off the lid that holds our emotions down, which is how I see it. I see acute grief really blows off a lid. And anything's possible, and it can be really, really helpful for a client or a friend who's in grief to be told that, to say it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling, and it really can make a difference. But that's not what I was going to go into in detail. What I want to look at here is the gifts that we can find, and so I'd like to look at some aspects or states of being that can accompany our grief journey, and it's maybe not, there may be not some of the most commonly spoken of states, yet I really feel that when we, well, I don't feel, I know from my experience and myself and others, that when we can really embrace and honor some of these states, they can become incredible gifts to ourselves and others. So let's dive in here. So this is a whole series of paintings here we're going to be looking at, and they're all done by the most amazing visionary artist, Autumn Skye Morrison, who I was very honored to meet at a festival in Oregon in the United States. Most beautiful conscious festival I've ever attended in the redwoods, and her artwork was all displayed in a big tent, so you could go around and look, and she was there as well, and I'm very grateful that she's given me permission to use her work here and to show it to you. And I really highly recommend you take a look at her website, which is credited on the paintings. You can see it in a moment, and purchase her work if you like it, because she sells it in lots of different mediums. But okay, so we're going to drop into these pictures, and how I'm going to do it is I'm going to invite a couple of moments silence to just look at each painting. So in turn, we'll look at each one in turn, and we'll just drop in, look at the painting, and then I'll say a few words about it from my perspective. This isn't Autumn Skye's interpretation of her work. This is how I'm just using her work to interpret a state of grief that I want to talk about, and then we'll move on to the next. Okay. So, Eternal Waters. Sometimes grief can seem like an endless ocean of tears, especially in acute grief, and when it can threaten to drown us, to engulf us, and we can really struggle to breathe. Our grief it becomes thick and viscous within us, and and we could be literally choked by it. And in these times, life can seem so far away. As you can see here, there's no shoreline. Where is the shore? It's our life can seem so distant, impossible to reach. Yet in this ocean of our tears, so beautifully illustrated here, can we become an island of refuge for others lost at sea? Can we ourselves become the shore, the safe harbor, the beacon on dry land, the lighthouse? In our work as guides and as helpers of in some form, and we're all that, whether we're professionally doing that or we're just friends, we're all guides and helpers. And if we can rise up from the depths of our grief, from our grief ocean, then I really believe that we can all become this island of refuge and call others and help others. So that's the sort of first state that I wanted to talk about, that state of being in an ocean of tears. It can seem that we're lost, but sometimes we can be a guide and a help and a solace for others. Morning dew. Sometimes grief is desolate, and we can find ourselves feeling really desperately alone and cast adrift in a desert that just seems so parched, so dry, that we might feel there's no possibility of bringing life back to the world. And it feels like everything has just turned to dust and it's been blown in the wind. Yet despite our need for water in this dry grief place, this desolate place, as shown here, can we allow our stream of tears to bring life back to our world? I always find it amazing how the shedding of tears can release so much. It astounds me, and it seems like when that release has happened, then life seems to rush into the void that's being created, and we can suddenly feel alive and vibrant. And sometimes we're like giddy with the sensation of life running in our veins, and it's quite astounding. And allowing tears to fall as much as they need to, for ourselves and for our clients, can be a really potent medicine, just to create that space for tears to fall. Sometimes it's all that's needed, and life comes back. Resilience. When we're young, we can often feel really keenly the call of nature to be held by us, to be nurtured and protected. It seems to be some sort of natural, innate quality in so many children. Maybe it's all children. And the question here is in that, with that awareness, can we reach back to that inner child and allow him or her to speak through us as adults? And can we help our clients to do the same? And it's delicate and deep and powerful work, to listen, to hear that calling and to heal that yearning. Holding space for the child within requires a sensitivity and a patience. And one of the reasons I chose this picture was because I am a beekeeper, but when I was the age that the child is in this picture, I wanted to pick up a bumblebee and I just wanted to hold it because it was so cuddly and soft. And but I knew it would sting me. I wasn't so young that I didn't know that. And so I got a bit of tissue paper and I picked it up, and of course it promptly stung me straight through the tissue onto my thumb, and it hurt. Bumblebees have got big stings. But that need to nurture was there, and so sometimes finding that, reaching back into that child state can be powerful work for us as therapists and coaches. Pieta. Our grief for our environment, for our Mother Nature, and for our Divine Mother, you could see it as our true home. As we discussed earlier, it can be impossible to bear. The fact that when we touch this grief, we can feel just as trapped as the animals that we ensnare and kill. We can feel just as desecrated as the forests, and defiled as the oceans. And this entrapment perfectly expresses our profound sense of loss. Yet the problem is it can disempower us to act. As I've said before, the enormity of the problem can totally overwhelm us. Yet, with love and forgiveness, with each small gift of sustenance and compassion to any other life form, I feel we move to ourselves towards a sense of balance and redemption. And for our clients to touch this place, for me, it's essential. If we're going to bring healing only to ourselves and not to the world, then really, what hope have we got? If we're not gifting our love to all of life, then there isn't going to be any other life. Simple as that. So we've got to extend ourselves beyond and outward, and we have to work on ourselves first. But then, hopefully, we have the ability to reach out. And so, guiding clients to feel that sense of sensitivity to the needs of all of life seems really necessary. Helping them to recognize the overwhelm and address it in just small and manageable ways, and then and applying that to their business and their personal lives, and that can lead to healing for them, but obviously healing to the world as well. Amazing grace. Sometimes, in my experience, our grief can feel blessed, and a sense of being holy, and we can feel blissfully alone in that experience, maybe in deep connection and communion with someone we've lost, or with God, Goddess. But sometimes we're not quite feeling human. We might feel angelic even, and we can sometimes find it hard to relate to others who aren't in this exalted state. And maybe the task is to come back down to earth, to wrap our wings around others who are in need of our love. And I strongly believe that we're all an aspect of the divine. When we embody this, then it's a perfect time to open our hearts to those in need. And we're all capable of touching and sharing that if we dare go there. Our grief can certainly take us there. And sometimes, sorry, I'll give you a moment with it. So at times our grief can be a temple. We can feel filled with light and love, and the gift in this space is to invite others to pray with us, and the question is, can we shine our light out and illuminate those around us? And prayer in our modern culture is often seen as a petition or a request for divine agency and intervention, and for me, it's just simply a place of silence, of union, of coming together with the essence of life, with tasting that sense of connection, and meeting a client in that place, in that space of inner temple, and simply honoring that it exists. Or directly sharing the experience with them. It can be really profound to touch that when someone's in that space, in their grief. True harbour. So we've probably all experienced a time when grief can be like the storm in the picture here. Is this a destructive power, and we can feel we're capable of just wiping out everything, of just destroying the world around us. But in the center of all of that chaos, if we're sensitive to it, we'll find there's this golden light, this space of witness inside. If we can anchor onto that, and we can allow ourselves to be seen as this power-filled storm without having to be it, if we can come into that still point, that eye of the storm, then I believe we can really express our power in a way that's much more potent. That's an activator of change, and grief that drives us to change the world for the better. And it's a beautiful grief. And as coaches, we can help our clients harness that energy and guide them to direct it away from that destructive path and into one of transformation. And it's a potent energy that has caused so many people to make massive changes in the world. And anger from our grief either destroys or it transforms, and it just totally depends on how we harness it. Spiritual. I see a lot of beauty in death and loss, and it's well, for me, death is life's witness, and through the sacrifice of life, we sacrifice to death, then life is born anew and sustained, and the cycle continues. And when we can fully embrace that dance, that paradox of light and dark, then it can be a big gift, that awareness. It seems to me that all the spiritual teachers throughout all of the ages, and there's many current in the world, it's one of the strongest gifts they're passing on, and that awareness of this interplay of life and death, and seeing it for what it is, and if we can hold that, if we can receive that in the first place, and if we can hold that, the task is then, can we pass it on? And I believe we're all able to do those things, and we've all got a slight different take on it. We've got our unique way, how we engage with that process. And but when we can truly face our own mortality, and make that inquiry into the nature of life in a deep and profound way, then then I think we inherently come to that balance. We come to see that, and we might find it really difficult to explain, but it's something that's that we express with our action, so holding a space for a client to express beauty in death can be really it can be affirming for them, because it's something that isn't often done in our culture. We tend to abhor and shy and deny and push death away, but if we can bring it into the room and say, isn't it beautiful, this process, and how it feeds life, then it can be a real gift. Wisdom of the ages. So, as I mentioned earlier with Francis's work, the very fabric of our bodies is woven. It's a tapestry of the bodies, and the muscles and the skin and the hair and the bone of our ancestors. We're made from them, and their pain and their joys. It's like they form a backdrop to this play of our life. It's like we're acting on a stage built by them for us, for us to dance and explore our version of life. But with that analogy, this play can become a tragedy when those sorrows from the past come in and dominate our lived experience, and the gift is maybe finding the ability to honor that ancestry while not letting the past restrict us and constrain us, and maybe we can really be free if we're honoring it but not constrained by it. We can be free to create a new work of art, and that's unique to our expression, rather than repeating the mistakes of the past. And obviously there's a gift there to be then passed forward to future generations that are waiting in the wings to come on and play their part. Call of the river. So this speaks to a state that I don't feel is very very well witnessed at all, but it's something that I've certainly seen a lot of. It's that grief can sometimes cause us to really dive fully into the river of life. We can have some intense period of grief, and suddenly we find ourselves really celebrating the totality of our journey, and we can feel vibrant with life, and it's just an exhilaration and ecstatic state, and some can see this as a denial of a person's loss and grief, and it may be, but it doesn't have to be so. I've known grief to inspire a phenomenal engagement with life, for profound loss to turn someone from struggling with depression and to suddenly wake them up, and for them to choose life. And grief can open that door at any time, and holding that awareness with a client can be if they're moving into that state, can be really invigorating for them that you see it, and it can really help them to open to the possibilities to them, give them more choices. So yeah, it can be a time of great celebration. And finally, revelation. There's times when our grief wants to, just like this shows in this picture, just wants to burst out of our skin. We want to rip ourselves open and just reveal, show, just expose our pain, and just light the world with it. We want that depth of what is really our love for what we've lost, to shine out, and we can be in it can feel an almost desperate space to explode outwards with that radiance, and to really express that love that we're feeling, that's for that person or that thing or that place or that time or whatever it is that we've lost, and we can find a space for that at times, but very often, it's very raw and it's incredibly honest, and so we feel a risk there that maybe we're going to shatter the pretense of normality, of convention, and but that's the question that arises. Is it possible to risk that expression, to have that radical state of expression true for us? And so with a client or ourselves, it's challenging. It's that level of exposure of our soul is inherently got challenge in it, but the reward can be phenomenal, and on some level it's like the ultimate gift we can make to the world. It's something so beautiful and so fleeting, but it can be a wonderful thing to behold. It's something that I've tried to do in many different ways, and sometimes I feel I've succeeded, and other times I've definitely not. Dance is the most purest form of expression that I've found for this, but I'm wondering how it is for you. You're all going to have some unique way of putting that depth across, whether it's in some creative form or through your work in whatever field that may be. So we've all got that ability to be that radical and expressive. So that's some of the gifts, and some of the areas you may not have experienced as a grief path. So we're going to come now to witnessing, and what is the gift you carry in your soul? What have you brought with you into the heart of the village? We long to feel cosmically significant, that it matters that we are here and that we make a difference. So this is the words again of Francis Weller, and we're all waiting for that space to be witnessed. We're all looking for that, even if we're not aware of it. If we've not had it, we may not be aware that that's missing in our lives. And witnessing another's grief can be hard, especially if you haven't acknowledged our own, and that triggers our own, and a lot of conflicting emotions and feelings might be expressed when people are sharing their grief, and it can come out in a confusion of delivery, when the dam breaks and there's a outpouring, and as a professional, as a coach, or a therapist, or as I said before, simply as a friend, we can sometimes wonder in that space, what can I do? What am I meant to? How can I fix this? How can I help this? But really, what witnessing is calling for is just our deep and attentive presence, and witnessing. It says to your client, what's being expressed here is a value. It's worthy of my attention, and of course it is. And so being in silence and in a space of presence with that client, without that need to fix, without the need to change or address anything, or find the right words or all that sort of stuff. It can just be a need to just be there, and just allow that tumble of words and those tears to flow. And also, it's important, as some of you probably are well aware, is not passing over a tissue or placing a hand on the shoulder, because that can very subtly say stop crying, and it can bring the person out of that process of release. It might be the very first time that they've ever cried. It might be the first time they've cried over this particular grief. It might be that they've always been told to not cry. Big boys don't cry, and all that story. And so allowing that space is important without interfering with it, just letting it be. And another thing that I like to hold people in and awareness in is that allowing tears to flow and then to dry on your skin, and not having them immediately wiped away and that mascara is running or that snot's coming, and just letting it be. And that can be incredibly honoring. It's like that grief that's come out from inside. It's now being displayed on the outside, and there can be a pride in that, and feeling the water evaporate and the salt's crust can be really, it's a completion of the process of crying. When we try and wipe it away, it's sort of like we're trying to end it, and this is a completion when the tears dry and crust. It can be really very, very a deep experience of people, and they really feel seen. And when that process completes, it's often amazing how much laughter can erupt. It can be giggling and whoops of joy, and it's almost like that joy has been waiting underneath the grief. It's like the grief has been pushing down the joy, and then suddenly it comes out, and there's this oh, God, I feel fantastic. It's like it's amazing. So value of witnessing. So time. So I want to look at crying a little bit more, and a lot of different aspect of crying. As a therapist or a coach or a guide, a professional, it can be very much seen that we're meant to hold that professional boundary, that we're not meant to be getting too emotional. And I have struggled with that concept, and until one day I found myself crying with a client who was talking about sexual abuse as a child, and I found tears falling, and I realized I was completely and utterly present as the professional, but I was also feeling the emotion, and the tears were falling. And afterwards she said how incredibly validating that was, and how it helped her to really be seen. So it's an invitation here. I'd like you to look into these eyes here, and just see them as your clients, as your friends, and what feeling comes up for you. What emotions arise? And now I invite you to close your eyes, if that's comfortable for you. And imagine a time when you have cried, when you've shed those tears of pain and grief, those tears of release. Really feel into what you felt in that moment, remembering the flavor, the taste of it. And now open your eyes and look at these people again, but see them as your therapist or your coach or your friend or maybe your lover or a guide of some sort. Do you feel that they know what you're going through? Do they feel more or less present for you? Do you feel seen and witnessed? And of course, when we are triggered, when it goes beyond empathy in the moment, and it's important that as therapists, as coaches, as professionals, that we do seek our own help and healing. So it's important to have that recognition that this has triggered something that I need to work on, rather than this is just an empathetic connection happening. There's a balance to be found there. And the last thing we're going to touch on in the last few minutes is the value of conscious solitude and the maturing of your grief. Our time in silence and solitude does not divide us from the world. We are ripened in the depths, made more completely who we are, this surge on into the places of our sorrows. It's part of the grief journey to be alone. Sometimes we're forced there. Our partner leaves us. You know, we lose a job. We're sat at home, nothing to do. Sometimes we're forced into that place, and the more conscious we can be there, the better it's going to be. And sometimes we want to seek out solitude. It's important to be held and to share, but it's also important that we take that time alone. And sometimes it's just that the world becomes just too much. You know, in that intensity of grief, we can be just bombarded by the neon nature of the world, the noise and the bustle, and it's just, whoa, too much, too brash, and we just need to take time alone and be quiet and sit in the garden or stroke a cat or whatever we need to do. And sometimes we need to go away somewhere, to go on retreat, to go climbing a mountain, so and sit on a beach. And as I touched on earlier, it's important in that time to remain connected, to have someone knowing where you are and what you're doing and why you're doing it. It can make a huge difference when you're in that depth on your own, to feel that thread of connection to somebody else, and to then come back to them and say, hey, I had that time on the beach, and I cried a lot. It was really helpful, and thank you for being there for me, because it really makes a difference. And we might, in that solitude time, and collectively too, but we might find some sort of ritual, some sort of ceremony, and that's also very important, and that could be another whole webinar. And then when we're in that space, Francis talks about it as we come to the edge of our sorrow and we meet the world. And that was, when I read that, it really resonated with me, that when I'm up a mountain, I'm on a beach, and I'm in my sorrow, and I'm caught in my story, and then suddenly I'm here and I'm in the land, and I'm seeing that eagle fly, and I'm noticing that rainbow in the cloud, and it's just, suddenly the life comes to meet me, and we can dance with that, and it's something that we can talk about, but we can never really explain the enormity of that encounter, and it really that going to that edge can cause us to really engage. So there's more I could talk about here, but I'm going to leave it there. So to wrap up, to conclude, I see grief as it's like a solo pilgrimage. It's like we're all on a path that's really well worn. Everybody is walking this path, and everybody who's ever walked the earth has walked this path before us. And but every single loss that we have, big or small, it's unique, and we may feel that we've been here before. Oh, I've been here before. I've had a loss like this, but we've never had a loss quite like this. Every time it's unique. The particular nuance, the depth, the taste of it is always going to be completely unique. And so we're treading on this path for the first time every time, and so it feels like, for me, it's like a pilgrimage, and as pilgrims of grief, if you like, we sometimes need to walk alone. Like I just said, it's really important to have that solo time, that conscious time alone, and be with our bodies and be with our hearts and our minds, and to listen to that conversation, and to be with our soul, and to be with God, the universe, the world. And sometimes we need to be together with others on this path, and to walk along with them, and to share the journey. And sometimes we just need to sit. We just need to sit on the side of the path and just rest and just be. And it really doesn't matter how long our journey takes. We're just moving along it. We can take time out. We can come back to it. We can run along it. We can take it slow. Everybody's got the different way of walking it. And always, as a pilgrim would, we need to find that reverence for the journey, and that's something that I really want to leave you with. Is that grief for me is a reverential experience. It's not something to be pushed away. It's something joyous to behold, and the more we can find some ritual and some ceremony around that, and whatever that means for us, and the more that we can recognize that we're all on this shared journey together, and we're all walking it together. Then we all know we can help each other, because we all know that that's true for us. And as we walk with our grief, and it really behoves us to have a sense of gratitude with us at all times, to hold gratitude in our hearts, it's like grief and gratitude go together on the journey. And a strength of faith is needed, and that faith is that this path does lead to joy, that this pilgrimage is taking us to an engagement with the temple of life, and it does, it simply does, and that keeps, and that faith can keep us moving forward. And like Khalil Gibran says, the deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more your joy can contain. So that's me. Thank you for the time, and for sharing this journey with me. If you'd like to work with me, then I'm available for one-to-one sessions. But for those of you on the call today, Dawn asked if I would be able to have some sort of offering. So if anything's come up for you, you'd like to do some more work on this topic in a workshop sort of situation online, then you're welcome to email me, and just in the next day or two. And I'm going to hold a space for a discounted webinar workshop space, probably about 1.5 to 2 hours long, and I can email you details around that. You don't need to. I'm not necessarily going to be able to commit what a date it is just yet. I'm heading off on a vision quest to attend to my own grief for 12 days from this Friday, so it won't be until September. But if you're interested, then I'm going to hold that for sometime in September, and we can liaise together, and whoever is interested on what dates would work for you. So I'll be for 6 people. So if you're interested, find me an email, and you'll find my email. Well, my website's there on the bottom of the page there, spiritofthemoment.co.uk. Email is spiritofthemoment@gmail. So yeah.
Yeah, wow, very powerful, and as you say, challenging stuff, Simon. Thank you. Okay. I mean, the gates are very, very powerful, but certainly the sorrows of the world makes many individuals feel powerless and overwhelmed. I think is really relevant at this particular time, that with the global grief through, you know, various losses, whether it's freedom, income, identity, career, loved one, a lot of people are left feeling they just can't make a difference, and that's a very overwhelming space to be in. And as coaches, that's where we can make a difference. Coaches, therapists, counselors. You've given us some very valuable insight as to how we can just hold that safe space. And that ball of grief graphic, it was a really good reminder of all the different things that people go through, all the different emotions, and that they're all okay. And thank you for sharing that beautiful artwork from Autumn Sky as well. That was really lovely. And also the beautiful words that you interpreted. So thank you very much for your generosity of spirit and in sharing this valuable lesson with us at this particular time. It's very much appreciated. And enjoy your own vision quest, if enjoy is the right word.
Yeah, I've had a lot of resistance coming up for it, but I'm it's being held by some wonderful people, so I'm sure it'll be fine.
Right, well, I look forward to hearing about it afterwards. And for anybody interested, after Simon's vision quest, we're actually going to be accrediting his program. So he's got a lot more to come, and support and resources for you. So thank you everybody for attending this 90-minute webinar. Thank you, Simon. Have a fabulous transformation learning experience at your vision quest, and I'll speak to you again in September. And thank you everybody. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.